Hello YouTube, this is Pastor Green with another Creation Science seminar. Today we're going to do part 2A, the Garden of Eden. This is session 3 of 14. You can email me with any questions at godsohman@gmail.com. This is going to be a YouTube creation seminar. Make sure you subscribe to my page. If you don't know where the subscribe button is, if the video is maximized, just click on the bottom right of your screen where it says subscribe. If it's not maximized, just click on the subscribe button next to my name. Make sure you click the notification bell, that way you get updates anytime I post a new video. Like the video, that helps with the YouTube algorithm, that gets it seen more. And also comment, tell me what you thought. And if you don't really have anything to say, you could just comment good job or thank you or whatever you want. That way it gets comments. That also helps with the YouTube algorithm. In the last days, there's going to be scoffers that are wittily ignorant of three things: the creation, because they believe if there's a creator, that means that the earth was created and there has to be a God. The flood, because if God created the world and he caused the flood, that means it is his and he can judge the world. And the coming judgment, because if there's a coming judgment, there's something we have to be accounted for in the future, and they don't like those things, so they're very ignorant of the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. In seminar part 1, A and B, we covered why the Big Bang Theory is stupid, and we covered scores of ways to show that the Earth cannot be billions of years old. In this session, we'll discuss what was the original creation like. So today we're going to talk about the Garden of Eden. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, United States of America. There's the little map there showing you about where I live at. In Colossians 1:16, the Bible says, "For by him," talking about Jesus, "were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him." So in Colossians 1:16, it's saying that all things were created by Jesus. So Jesus should know when the creation was. In Matthew 19:4, it says, "He answered them, saying, Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female?" And in Mark 10, it actually gives you a little more information. It says, "But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female." So Matthew and Mark are saying that God created Adam and Eve in the beginning. Romans 5:12 says, "Wherefore, as by one man's sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." So Romans 5:12 is saying that because of Adam, we now have sin in the world, and because of sin, we now have death. So it's impossible to have death before Adam. 1 Corinthians 15:21-22 says, "For since by man came death, and man came also the resurrection of the dead, for as in all Adam died, even so Christ shall be made alive." So it's saying that because of Adam's sin, there's death in the world, there's also sin. And so because of Christ, we're all alive. And then it says, "For so it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The last Adam was made a quickening spirit." Meaning the first Adam brought death into the world by him sinning. He became a living soul. And then the second Adam, which is Christ, is going to be our quickening spirit. Genesis 5:3 says, "And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son named Seth. And Seth lived 105 years and begot Enos. And Enos lived 90 years and begot Cain." And so if you take each one of these people and you look at their ages when they had a kid, so Adam was 130, Seth was 105, Enos was 90, Canaan was 70, and you keep adding those all up, you're going to get that the earth was created around 6,000 years ago, or around 4000 BC. You can get this chart from me for $5, or you can go to drdiner.com and you can buy them 6 for $30. So the question is, what was it like before the flood? And how could a man live to be over 900 years old? If you look at the chart, everybody except for Enoch, which obviously was taken up into heaven, lived to be older than 900 years. And then after the flood, people started passing away sooner. It went from 900 down to 600, down to 400, down to 200, down to 100, and now people are lucky to live past 90. So right there, Adam lived to be over 900 years old. I think he was 930. Yeah, Adam was 930. And it says the average age before the flood was 912 years. And today it's about 70 to 80 years old. But yet, if you read kids' books, it says millions of years ago. All the kids' books talk about dinosaurs living millions of years ago. But how is that possible? Did dinosaurs live millions of years ago? The question is, have people seen living dinosaurs? This is a pot with a dinosaur on it. And what was the original creation like? What did they eat before the flood? And what will it be like in the 1,000-year reign of Christ? You see, after the rapture, there's going to be a wrath. And then after the wrath, there's going to be a 1,000-year reign of Christ. And in that 1,000 years, the Bible says that the world is going to be just like it was in the beginning of creation. So the question is, where did all the water come from to fill the entire world? Where did it all go? And were there really giants, people over 10 feet tall on the earth? Genesis 6:4 says there were giants in the earth in those days. 2 Peter 3 says, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. There's a term in science today called uniformitarianism. And what that means is the past is the gateway to the future. So what they do is they'll sit there and look, like if you watch my last video on the age of the earth, they'll look at the coral reefs and they'll say, wow, looks like these coral reefs are growing X amount of inches every year. So you look at how many inches of coral reef there was, and they say, oh, well, it must have happened, 4,400 years ago. Or they look at Niagara Falls and they say, wow, Niagara Falls is actually getting smaller and smaller by a certain rate. And if you extrapolate that out, oh, that must be 9,000 years ago. And that's what they do. But they're not taking certain things into account. For instance, if the world was different, then obviously we wouldn't have the same erosion rate. If the world was different, we wouldn't have the same carbon-14 deterioration rate. If the world was different, like for instance, if it was a flood, then they're going to have more of a deterioration rate. Things like that they don't take into consideration. And it says later, for this they are willingly ignorant, but by the word of God the heavens were old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. So it's saying when the first creation happened, it's saying that there was water above the earth and inside the earth. And it says they're willingly ignorant. That's Greek. That means dumb on purpose. And it says the heavens, because after the original creation, there was more than one heaven. Then 2 Peter 3 says, whereby the world that was, being overflowed with water, perished. So first we had the creation, and now we have the flood. But by the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, preserved in the fire against the day of judgment and perdition unto ungodly men. So that's saying that soon there's going to be a coming judgment. So the creationist timeline says 6,000 years ago there was a creation, 4,400 years ago there was a flood, 2,000 years ago Jesus was born, and now we're living in the age of the Gentiles, and someday soon there's going to be a rapture. And the scoffers are ignorant of the creation, which is right here, the flood, and the coming judgment. And we saw this bumper sticker, and it said, Jesus is coming soon, and boy is he mad. Sadly, many Christians are ignorant of the creation and flood, and this ignorance has caused them to compromise the clear teaching of the Bible with currently accepted theories, such as the gap theory and the day-age theory, and there's many problems with both of those. You see, Genesis 1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So it's saying that in the beginning, God created it. And if you go down to verse 5, and it said, God called the light day, and the darkness night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. There's a definite article there saying the, which means there's only one first day. So it's saying that God created the heavens and the earth on the first day. That's day number 1. And I'll explain the problems with the day-age theory and the gap theory on separate seminars. We'll go over that later. And also, there's a different interest in things when you look at different Bible versions. For instance, the King James says in Colossians 1:4, it says, in whom we have a redemption through his blood. But other versions will say, in whom we have redemption. They don't put the through his blood. King James says through faith in his blood. Other versions just say by faith. King James says the innocent blood, but other versions just say innocent blood. King James says washed us from our sins. Other versions just say freed us from our sins. It also says in King James blood which is shed. Other places say cup which is poured. You see, I'm one of those people that believe that the King James is the infallible, inerrant Word of God, and there's no contradictions in there. In other versions, in order to get their copyright, they have to make it 10% different from everybody else, so they have to change a couple things. But sometimes the things they change are really important. I'm okay with people reading the NIV and the NASB and the ESV and the NLT, the New King James. I'm perfectly fine with that. But understand that there's things missing from all these translations that actually give deeper meaning to the scriptures. And you can get more about different Bible versions at avpublications.com, or you can buy an Instant King James Library from drdiner.com. I think it's around $260. And many new versions have taken out dozens of versions, like Acts 4:25, 8:37, 1 John 5:7, Revelations 1:11. And we'll go over more Bible versions when I talk about question and answers, and also seminar number 7. Mark 4:15 says, Satan cometh immediately and taketh away the world. But, it's pretty bad that some of these translations have taken certain verses out. Genesis 1:6 says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. So one of the questions I get is, what's a firmament? Well, some say it's the dirt, because the dirt keeps the water from the water. See, it keeps the oceans on both sides of it, so it must be the dirt. But see, the Bible tells you exactly where the firmament is. It says in Genesis 1:20, and God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that have life, and fowls, such as birds, that fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. So the firmament is where the birds fly. But then it talks about another firmament. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night. And God made 2 great lights, the stars also. So we have the firmament. There's actually 3 firmaments. The first firmament is where the birds fly. The second firmament is where the stars are. And the third firmament is where God lives. See, the only verse I have to talk about the third firmament is a verse in 2 Corinthians 12:2. This is I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago, whether in the body I cannot tell, or whether out of the body I cannot tell. Only God knows. Such one cut up to the third heaven or the third firmament. Psalms 19:1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, their firmament show his handiwork. It says the heavens plural, so that means there has to be at least 2, if not 3. Genesis 1:7 says, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. So that's only 2 different things. So the first firmament is where the birds fly. So it says there was water under the firmament, which is obviously our oceans, or the water that was under the continents. And then from the waters above the firmament, which has to be above where the birds fly, or it has to be a firmament in space to separate the space above and below. And I still believe there's firmament in the third heaven, because God said there was. But what about this firmament between where the birds fly? It says in Psalms 148:4, it says, praise him, ye heavens of heavens, and ye waters that be above the heavens. So this is where I get that there must be still a firmament, a water vapor or ice vapor above where the stars are. And it's possible that all we can see, the universe, is just one of those snow globes sitting on God's dresser that he shakes around once in a while. Again, 2 Peter 3:5 says, for this they are willingly ignorant, that by the word of God that the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. So how can the earth be out of the water and in the water? Isaiah 40:22 says, it is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are grasshoppers, that he stretched out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out in a tent to dwell. Now it says he stretched out the heavens. What does this mean? Does it mean that he took the heavens and he stretched them out? Actually, the word stretched out the heavens is 17 times in the Bible. See, everyone's asking how the light got from the star to the earth. But the real question is, how did he get? The real question is, how did the stars get from earth to heaven? You see, it says 17 times in the Bible, he stretched out the heavens. He stretched out the heavens. He stretched out the heavens. Stretched forth the heavens. See, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And on day 4, he made the stars. So no one's asking how the star got from the earth to there. They're only asking how the star got from the star, the light got from the star to us. So the Earth's atmosphere has about 6 layers today. There used to be a 7th layer of water or ice above the atmosphere. And what that firmament did on top of inside the heavens is it actually blocked out UV light and radiation. You know, some people think that it was a layer of ice suspended with a magnetic field using the Meissner effect. And it's really interesting that if it blocks out UV light and radiation, that's actually going to help us out because UV light and radiation destroys our skin. And people believe it's there by the Meissner effect because if you take a super cold item, it can actually float. It's called Meissner effect. And there's actually trains in Japan that use the Meissner effect. They suspend their trains on super conducting coils, and this causes very little if no friction. And by doing this, they can go 600 plus miles an hour. So you take a magnet, and you take a superconductor, and you make it really, really cold by using liquid nitrogen, and this magnet will actually float. And it's really interesting. This magazine in astronomy.com said ice clouds are forming from the shuttle's exhaust, and these clouds drift towards the poles and float there. So what it's saying is when these shuttles go off into space, they have these big clouds of water, and it floats up into the sky and it actually forms clouds. Then over time it works its way to both the north and south poles because very, very cold ice is attracted by magnetism. The book of Josephus says he set the heavens above the universe surrounded with ice. So Josephus is saying that there was a firmament above the earth. Another translation says he also placed a crystalline firmament around it, which would be ice. This book here says the thickness is about 3 fingers thick. This one says it's about 2 fingers thick. And the word they use is actually reveals that the return to a flattened solid surface, which has to be ice. The Legends of the Jews by Louis Ginzberg says, on the 2nd day, God brought forth 4 creations, the firmament, hell, fire, and the angels. The firmament is not the same as in heaven on the 1st day. It is a crystal stretched forth over the heads of the Hayat, from which the heavens derive their light, and the earth derives its light from the sun. So what they're saying is that the light hits this firmament and causes the whole entire earth to light. It was made to crystallize into the solid. It was by the heavenly fire which broke its bounds and condensed the surface of the firmament. Thus fire made a division between the celestial and the terrestrial at the time of the creation. And as it did the revelation on Mount Sinai, the firmament is no more than 3 fingers thick. So this little verse here, this little book's telling you that the firmament was about 3 inches thick, or about the size of 3 fingers. 3 fingers thick, or about 2 inches. So this is a picture from Carball, and it talks about the canopy of water overhead and water underneath in the crust. The firmament separated by the firmament above and below. Psalms 24 says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell within, for he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. So this verse is saying that the continents, the foundation of the earth, was founded upon the seas and upon the floods, saying that there was water below the continents. Psalms 33 says, he gathered the waters of the sea together as a heap, and he layeth in the depth in storehouses, meaning they took all the waters and they put it in storehouses underneath the continents. Psalms 136:6 says, to him that stretched out the earth above the waters. Again, it's saying that there was earth above the water. And the original creation was very different than what it is today. There was a layer of water above the atmosphere, and we say that there was a few inches of ice caused by the Meissner effect, and the atmosphere had about 15 to 20 miles. Um, and then you had about 15 to 20 miles of crust, and then a half mile of water under the crust. And that's what the original Earth would look like. See, all this water was sitting underneath all the continents, and it was just sitting there in storehouses until the flood happened. Genesis 7:11 and 12 says, "On the 600th year of Noah's life, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights." I've got a Bible study going on for Genesis 7 and 8 that talks about this a little bit more clearly. But it says the fountains of the great deep broke up, so all that water that was underneath the continents got broken forth and came up onto earth. So you see what happened is when the cracks happened, the different faults, it actually cracked up the earth, and this water was free from all the pressure, and it shot up into the air. This is a picture from Walt Brown's hydroscape theory that showed you about what it looked like when the fault lines were broke open. All this water would shoot up. You know, a cubic foot of rock weighs about 160 pounds. 10 miles of rock would put 8,448,000 pounds of pressure per square foot on the water. That's about 30 tons per square inch, or 5,867 psi's. And once a crack developed, allow the water would shoot rocks up into space. And the debris in space would cause meteors that come from Earth. So as the Earth is spinning around, it's hitting all this debris, and that's going to cause a lot of craters on Earth. It's also going to hit the moon. And if you look at the moon, the side that's facing us have great big huge craters. Probably when the waters of the deep broke up, it shot these big rocks and just shotgun blasted the moon. And that's why you have great big huge blasts on the near side. But on the far side, you have these really, really small craters. I think that's the rock coming back in and hitting the back of the moon. So the near side would be the big rocks that got shot up from Earth, and the far side would be as the moon is moving around, it's just hitting in small places. These are actually impact sites here on the Earth, showing different meteorites hitting, and the bigger the circle shows the bigger the meteorite was. The Benzer crater in Winslow, Arizona, was probably hit about 100 years after the flood. And during the flood, waters rushed out of the cracks and the crust sank and spread apart. So you're going to get a bulge in the continents, which is going to cause lubrication for the continents, and then the waters are going to actually cause the continents to drift apart. This is just an artist's rendition of what would happen if you have these two continents sitting on top of water, which is lubricating them, and this pressure. The pressure is going to push the water underneath the continents down, and it's going to cause a bulge, which is going to cause some type of mountain range, and then the water's just going to drift off, and since the continents are lubricated, they're also going to drift off with it. This is just one of those little pictures from Walt Brown's book showing you what he thinks would happen. The waters are going to bulge up, and then the continents are going to slide to the side. And that would explain the Ripple Mountains. See, all over the world we have these things called Ripple Mountains. They're called folded mountains. And what happens is the Earth, they had to be soft rock, and they were jagged. If you could see all the different layers inside of it, they were jagged because they were soft rocks, and over time they hardened, and that's how you get these cool-looking folded mountains or Ripple Mountains. Folded mountains are the best explanation for lateral compression as the plates slide back and forth. And there's more of that on Seminar 6, which is going to be the green theory. You know, all over the world we have fault lines. We have the San Andreas Fault, there's the Hayward Fault. We have faults all over the world. And the really interesting part of it is if you look, you can actually see how there's volcanoes that are all over the fault lines. Those blue lines are going to be fault lines, and the red dots are volcanoes. And if you look at the fault lines, almost all the volcanoes are on those fault lines. That's because when the fountains of the deep broke up and when the fault lines happened, all that lava and magma got pushed up to the surface. This is a picture of San Andreas Fault in California. And today, some water is still trapped under the crust. And then you have snow and ice on top from rain. And also we have today's oceans. And over time, the waters are going to evaporate and come back down as rain. But there's still going to be water underneath the continents. And we know there's water under the continents because all over the world, we have these underwater vents, these hot water vents on the ocean floor. If there obviously there's vents at the bottom of the ocean floor shooting water out, the water has to be below that. Just common sense. You see, greenhouse effect it results when a large amount of carbon dioxide and other gases trap heat near the surface of the Earth. So if we had a big layer of ice around the Earth, that's going to cause the Earth to have a greenhouse effect. This book right here by Carl Ball, it says water vapor surrounds planets, scientists discovered. European scientists using an ultra-cold orbiting telescope have discovered unimaginable volumes of water in the space between the stars. The scientists were astounded to find water vapors in the freezing atmospheres of Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, and also Titan, which is one of the moons. Dr. Ball thinks that a canopy of ice would change the star's radio waves to audible frequencies. In Job 38:7 it says, "When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy." So Carl Ball, and I also agree, that having this canopy of ice around is going to be like a big magnifier, a big amplifier. And you can actually hear the stars talking to us. They actually have radio telescopes that actually listen to what the stars are saying. And I'm sure most of you guys have made a crystal radio. It uses two different kinds of rocks to make a crystal. You use the two different kind of rocks, and then what you do is you actually move the wire across those rocks, and you can actually hear different frequencies on it. We have satellites all over the world that's just strictly made to actually listen to the sound of the stars. This is actually one of the biggest ones right here. You see, what happens is radio waves let us see objects we can't see in visible light, like galaxies, like the gases in the galaxies. The dish acts like a big mirror and focuses radio waves on the receiver. And the information from the receiver is processed by computers to create visual images. See, as humans, we can only see visible light. We can't see radio waves, we can't see microwaves, we can't see infrared, ultraviolet, or X-rays. All we can see is the visible light. But these satellites, the computer technologies, lets us see all the other different waves that there's out there. Again, we can only see the visible light. We can't see radio waves, we can't see the infrared waves, we can't see ultraviolet, we can't see X-rays. All we can see is the visible light. But these computers can actually see multiple different types of waves. As you can see on this chart, there's multiple different wavelengths they can actually see, not just the visible light. And a lot of people think, look at the stars and they say, we can see the zodiac code up there. There's stars out there for every single person by the time they were born. And it's very possible that these stars in the sky were with the way the original Christians actually talked about the gospel. They would start with the Virgin, and they would end up with Leo the Lion. So you would start with Vertigo, and you would end with Leo, talking about the whole gospel in the stars. And there was actually a magazine, or actually a newspaper that came out in the Minnesota News in '93. This is a new theory: the lack of oxygen, not asteroids, killed the dinosaurs. So what this chart is saying is that the dinosaurs were killed by a lack of oxygen. This magazine right here, this website, The Naked Scientist, also say that oxygen deprivation caused dinosaur extinctions. Did dinosaurs really die with the lack of oxygen? Well, see, this magazine, this newspaper article says an 80-foot-long apatosaurus, also known as a bronchiosaurus, had a set of nostrils about the same size as a horse's, for example. So it's saying that this great big, huge 80-foot dinosaur had nostrils the same size of our modern-day horse. An 80-foot-long apatosaurus had a set of nostrils the same size as a horse. This thing is 80 foot long, and he had small nostrils about that size. There's a lot of really interesting things right there. I mean, how can you have a dinosaur that's that big with really small nostrils? Well, see, there's actually, this right here is an insect trapped in amber, which is petrified tree sap. There's actually a couple different displays all over the world of amber. And we also find inside this amber there's little air bubbles. So one scientist took these air bubbles. He took the air bubbles and he actually sucked out some air out of it. And when he found out there's actually 50% more oxygen in these amber air bubbles than we have today. You see, this says right here, they found that it was 32% oxygen compared to our 21% that we have today. and some research shows it was actually 35% oxygen. The only trend in the recent literature is the suggestion of far more oxygen in the early atmosphere than anyone could possibly ever imagine. See, the oxygen on Earth was actually a lot more because we had a lot more plants. Under double atmospheric pressure, the blood will actually become oxygen saturated. Baby Jessica, after she was in the 8-foot well for 8-inch well for 58 and a half hours in Texas. This is what the backyard looked like during the rescue of baby Jessica. She lost most of her circulation in some parts of her body because she was actually stuck in there for 58 and a half hours. What they did is they put baby Jessica in the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. And now, it says baby Jessica's leg and foot was saved because of this hyperbaric oxygen chamber. This is baby Jessica at the White House a year later. So there's a lot of different things that they use oxygen hyperbaric chambers for. First of all, they use it for dive victims. See, when a diver goes in the water and they come up really fast, their blood doesn't really react very well, so they put them in these hyperbaric chambers. West Germany says that all stroke patients are sent promptly for 3 weeks of intensive hyperbaric oxygen treatments, and their insurance company actually pays for it. In England, over 6,000 multiple sclerosis patients are being treated by hyperbaric oxygen. In France, they found very rewarding results by the treatment of arthritis and vascular neurosis, and also advanced liver disease. In Japan, there's over 200 chambers, and they found very promising work in treatment of sudden deafness and blindness. In Sweden, they take care of diabetes, gangrene, and Buerger's disease. In Belgium, they do re-implants of extremities. In India, they help for leprosy. And this right here is a thing in the El Paso Times. It says hyperbaric therapy helps young cerebral palsy patients. This newspaper here in 2000 says that patients who got extra oxygen was half as likely to be nauseated after surgery. This right here says that hyperbarics in the southeast New York treats autism and neurology disorders, and they're getting remarkable results. This magazine right here talks about how hyperbaric chambers therapy is a really good way to heal people. This is actually a one-person hyperbaric chamber. And these are actually professional football teams that use hyperbaric chambers. The football teams, the NBA, as well as the National Hockey League. They found that healing time is twice as fast if they put them in hyperbaric chambers. The Dolphins, they have a player, Zach Thomas, that says that he chills out in an hour or so in a hyperbaric chamber. It's a 12 foot by 4 foot bag inflated with pure oxygen, and it helps heal the body. This Miracle Miner talks about how they used oxygen treatment to help out these people that were stuck in the mine. It says that doctors decided to transfer them to Pittsburgh for hyperbaric oxygen treatments. The family agreed to the transfer Thursday afternoon. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy can be used in the treatment of brain injuries, and it helps get oxygen to the body's tissues and can help increase blood cells to fight infections or promote healing of injuries. This dual chamber hyperbaric chamber is the only one type that can accommodate a patient with a breathing tube. So this right here is actually a hyperbaric sleeping bag. This person says, "I've never felt better or more rejuvenated than I did stepping out of this chamber for the first time." They have oxygen bars all over the United States. This happens to be one in Alaska. This is the hyperbaric chamber right here, and this is the guy sitting inside of it, just hanging out reading a book. This is actually a hyperbaric chamber that multiple people can sit into. This guy right here, he did something really cool. He found out that if he raised tomato plants, and he did it under a plastic greenhouse that filtered out UV light, and he put pressurized CO2 to the stems and plants, he got these ginormous tomato plants. He got a 16-foot tall plant that produces 907 tomatoes. He died in '93, but his work continues today. You can actually buy these plants from Japan. He found this one plant in '85 that it bears 10,000 tomatoes. This is right here a guy that's actually taken his idea and he's showing you what happens with it. The first picture is the ambient amount, which is 385 pounds per square meter. The second one is 535. The next one is 685, and the last one is 835. He found out when you add more oxygen or more carbon dioxide, then the plants actually grow bigger. The new in 2016, it says the deepest water found. They found water a third of the way down to the Earth's core. And these right here, vegetables or tomatoes, that was used with the therapy with using extra carbon dioxide. And just so you know, the tomatoes in this guy's hand, those are actually cherry tomatoes. You see how big they got? This magazine right here is talking about the Sonic Boom article. And it's showing you that inside these plants, they have these little circle things that actually absorb all the carbon dioxide. And this person right here, his squash plants ended up getting 5 squashes per leaf instead of 1. And this guy right here standing right next to his corn plants, 4.5 meters high. This right here, in the article, it talks about how they use the carbon and they get bigger leaves. Just things seem to grow bigger. These are some potatoes next to a 10 inches long. The bottom one shows you a cantaloupe the size of a soccer ball. And you can actually get Creation Illustrated. It's about $20 a year if you get one Creation magazine. Ken Hovind actually interviewed, did a radio interview with Jeannie Scott. Jeannie Scott is works for the National Center for Science Education, and their goal is to keep evolution in the classroom and get scientific creationism out of the classroom. This is a little small corner place where the National Science Education is. So this is a little corner store. And the Carnegie Foundation, financed by the National Center for Science Education, and that's where Dr. Eugenie Scott actually works. And like I said, their goal is to keep creation out of the public school. In a radio debate with Ken Hovind, she said there are 80 separate layers of coal in the Midwest, and she's right by saying that. If you take a look at the amount of coal in the world, the entire biomass of the world today could not possibly be converted to that much fossil fuel. But she's right again. And then she said there had to have been an enormous amount of time involved in the layering down of these coal seams. Well, right there, she's wrong. You see, in Montana, they have these great big, huge coal seams. This is some trucks right here showing you all this different coal. But they find really interesting things in these coal mines. Here's a bell they found inside a lump of coal. And they're saying these lumps of coal are millions of years old. Well, how can there be a bell inside them? This right here is an iron pot found inside of a coal mining area. This right here is a shoe sole, and you can actually see the stitching pattern through the thread twists. And they said the rock was about 213 to 248 millions of years ago. Well, how can you have all this artifacts and coal seams that people weren't even around to see? See, the guy said the Bible says, "I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth." So it's saying that there's herbs across the whole entire earth, and every green tree which yields the fruit of the tree, it shall be you for meat. Well, they actually found in Antarctica, there's well-preserved leaves there. But as you know, there's no trees growing in Antarctica. It says they found the deposit of leaves on the side of a cliff in a desolate stretch of the Trans-Arctic Mountains, about 250 miles from the South Pole. Well, again, there's no trees growing down by the South Pole. The Earth today is about 70% underwater, and much of the rest of the Earth is deserts, ice caps, tundras, and treeless mountain ranges. And only about 3% of the Earth is actually habitable for man. But see, God said in Isaiah, God formed the earth to be inhabited. See, the pre-flood world would have increased air pressure, 20 to 100% more, which is gonna help. Air pressure is gonna give you the hydrologic chamber effect, which means you're gonna heal faster. There's gonna be more CO2, 2% CO2 rather than 0.06%. There's gonna have filtered sunlight, so you're gonna have less UV and X-rays. You're gonna have perfect soil, which was later destroyed by a flood. the music from the music from the stars to open the stoma. 90% of the land is going to be inhabited, except for right now we have about 30%. And they water the roots through the ground instead of through rain, since they use mist. So the pre-flood world was probably loaded with bigger trees from animals from pole to pole. They actually find leaves and plants all over the world. And a water layer would block out harmful rays from the sun. The sun produces light, ultraviolet light, X-rays, gamma rays, and etc. And having that water vapor or that ice vapor is going to block out most of these harmful rays. You see, an X-ray takes a picture of your bones. You ever notice that the X-ray technician have all these different things on top of you, and they won't actually come in the room with you? They wear these vests. Why do they wear these vests? You see, X-rays shoot at your body like a bullet from a machine gun. They come out of this copper rod, and they shoot at you, and they go all over the place. And if you don't wear this vest, you can get hit by it as well. An X-ray exposes what's in your body in a reverse image. And that's why many radiologists have a negative outlook on life. But see, the sun's X-rays hit us every single day, except for on cloudy days. And your skin feels the full force of the sun's X-rays, and has to keep issuing more and more skin cells every single day. And that's why when we get older, we start looking differently. We start getting wrinkles, and we start having skin problems. Job 16:8 says, "And thou have filled me with wrinkles." You'd have to have lead or concrete umbrella to block you from the X-rays, gamma rays, and all the harmful rays coming from the sun. See, the average age before the flood was about 912 years old, and today was only about 70 to 80. You know, it says Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. And people say all the time, well, see, they weren't really doing ages like they're supposed to. They're really judging ages by how many months they were. Well, 65 years, that would only be about 5 years old. If you take 65 and divide it by 12, you get 5.5 years. So Methuselah and Enoch would have had to been 5.5 years old when they had babies. Well, that's physically impossible. But see, they don't want to say that man used to be bigger and better. They want to say they were bad and we've gotten better over time. So I'm going to stick with the Bible. You're saying they were both 65 years old. Robert Wadlow is one of the biggest men that ever lived. He was 8 foot 11 1/4 when he died. This is actually Robert Wadlow's foot next to a size number 11 shoe. And see, in Samuel, it talks about Goliath. It says that his cubit was 6 cubits in a span. Well, the cubit is the distance between the end of your middle finger to your elbow, and it usually averages about 18 to 12 inches. That would mean that Goliath was about 9 feet tall, about the same size as Robert there. There's actually a statue of Robert, and it says that when he died, he weighed about 490 pounds. Here's a drawing of an 11 foot 6 inch man from the Italian coal mine. Would you like to have that guy on your basketball team? Hey, pass the ball to Herman. He would just put it right in the basket. And you know, you can actually tell the difference between a male and female skeleton. It's not the amount of ribs that they have. The only bone in the body that will grow back is the lower rib. You see, the way you can tell the difference between a male skeleton and a female skeleton is if the feet are pointed towards the maw, it's a woman. Well, you can also look at the TMJ joint, which is the joint that goes between your lower jaw and your upper jaw. If that's worn out more than the woman, if that's worn out more than the man, it's got to be a woman. And they say that's probably because they have to keep telling us men everything twice because we didn't listen the first time. You know, they say the world's tallest man was 8 foot 7 inches. He lived in Ukraine before he died. There's another man right here that we know that's been over 8 foot tall. This right here is a newspaper article talking about a man that's 8 foot 4 and he's still growing. This right here is the guy's hand next to his brother. This is the guy trying to dial a number on a cell phone. You know, there was a guy in Greek. He was actually called Maximus, and it says that he was 8 foot 6 inches tall. And the Roman Emperor Maximus was 8 foot 6 inches tall. They've actually found skeletons that were 9 feet 8 inches. Here's another article that says there was two skeletons that were about 9 feet tall. Another one said they found some huge bones, and every skeleton was at least 9 feet tall. Here's a skeleton found that was nearly 10 feet tall. There's actually in Guam, they tell of the ancient ancestors that were giants, and they built the Lati stones there. The Lati stones are very, very huge stones. There's actually a man standing next to one of them right there. See, they actually said there was 8 giants ranging from 8 to 9 feet long, and they all wore heavy copy armor. And throughout the bunglings of these diggers and the total disinterest of the Archaeological Museum established, he's now been scattered and lost. You see, the government came in there and said, hey, these are bodily remains, we have to take care of it, and now nobody can find where these skeletons went. The History Channel talked on 2016 about a Dutch explorer finding a pair of skeletons more than 9 feet tall. This right here is a book by Carl Schooner. This is they found a skeleton 12 feet tall. This article is talking about another skeleton that was 12 feet tall. This right here is talking about from knee to heel they measured 39 inches. And so they had to have stood over 12 feet tall. Another one right here talks about 2 others, a male and a female. One was 9 feet 4 inches and the other one was 8 feet tall. I'm sorry, 9 feet 4. One male was 9 foot 4. One male was 8. And the other one was 10 feet tall. This one he talks about a woman who was 7 feet tall and she had an infant. This one right here talks about the skull was twice the size of a normal human skull. This one right here says, our friends told us how and whence they came into this country, and how they settled themselves here, and how it came that notwithstanding their vicinity to the Mexicans or the Aztecs, and they resembled each other so little, and lived perpetual warfare with each other. The tradition was that they handed down from the forefathers is that at the ancient times there lived a race of men and women who bore immense stature with heavy bones, and they were very bad and evil disposed people, for when they had for the greater part exterminated by the continual war, and the few that gradually left died away. In order to give us notation for the huge frame of these people, they dragged forth a bone, rather a thigh bone, from one of these giants. It was very strong and measured the length of a man at a good stature, so the thigh bone itself was as tall as a man. This bone was still entire from knee to hip joint. I measured it by my own person and found it to be the same, basically my own length, the same height as this person was. Although I'm a man of considerable height, it showed us many similar pieces of bones, and they were all worm-eaten and decayed. We, however, did not doubt for an instant that this country was once inhabited by giants. Cortez observed that we ought to forward these bones to His Majesty in Spain for this very opportunity. That was actually taken from Discovery and Conquest of Mexico, from this author right here. Here's a mummified head and an Incan kid 9.5 feet tall. This book right here says that they had people that were remarkably tall and stout, and they were people of much larger size than the tallest of their tribe. This one says that the Lenablelli Indians moved from the west to the Mississippi. They set out their scouts across the broad continent. And this guy, James Jones, the author and writer at the time, relates an occasion of the safe return of his spies from this tribe, having reconnected their eastern side of the Mississippi. There they told that they found a further bank of the river of fish inhabited by very powerful people who dwelt in great villages surrounded by high walls. They were very tall, so tall that the head of the tallest of this Indian tribe could not even reach their arms, and their women were of high stature and heavier limbs than the loftiest of large men in their confederate nations. And they were called the Aligwe. And they were men delighted in red and black paint, and their shrill war whoop, and the strife of a spear. Such was the revelation made by the spies to their countrymen. This guy, David Cusick, he was this person by birth. He writes in 1825 that among the legends of the people were the ancient stock. There was a powerful tribe with a really crazy name, and they were giants. He said that when the giant spirit made the people, some of them became giants. And these giants were said to have a silly mode of attack, waited until their attendant vindic was not expecting anything. After that time, and having endured the outrage of these giants, it is said that the people banded together, and throughout their final force of about 800 warriors, they successfully annihilated them. And after that, it was said that there was no giants anywhere. This was supposed to have happened around 25,000 winters before Columbus discovered America, right around 1000 BCE. At that time, the Aedeans would have arrived in the Ohio Valley. This right here is what we're talking about right here, about North Dakota. The local newspaper said that then from where the Mugi are thought to have come before they joined the Lily, i.e. from the ridge of the Mississippi source influenced the Dakota, Missouri, we have found this originally tired a prehistoric cemetery 2 miles from North Dakota on the bluffs of their junction from the Hart and Missouri rivers, says a local newspaper. The Pioneer, in an old cemetery full of 100 acres in extent, filled with bones of giant races. The vast city of the dead lies just east of the Fort Lincoln Road. The ground has appearance of having been filled with trenches piled full of dead bodies, both man and of beast, and covered 7 feet of earth. This has evidently become a great battlefield, where thousands of men have fallen. Nothing like a systematic or intelligent exploration has been made. Only little holes 2 or 3 feet in depth have been dug in some of the mud mounds by many parts of the anatomy of men and beasts and beautiful specimens broken to pottery and other curiosities. And they found in these feeble efforts of excavation, 5 miles above the median of the opposite side of the Missouri, in another vast cemetery yet unexplored. We asked the Indians if his people knew of these ancient graveyards, and he says, "We know nothing of them, and they were here before the red man." When this township was opened in 1872, one of the numerous Indian mounds that abound in the neighborhood. This particular mound was called the Bates Mound. Upon being dug into it was found a container of a few pieces of earthenware, a lot of flint heads, and 1 or 2 stone implements. And the remains of these 3 skeletons were a size indicated they measured at least 8 feet in height. The remarkable features of these remains was they had double teeth in the front as well as in the back jaw, with both their upper and lower jaws. And upon exposure to the atmosphere, these skeletons crumbled back into Mother Earth. And cultivating the soul of the vicinity, implements have been found and excavated in the ground for graves, so that bones would have exhumed, which seems to have belonged to a race of giants. The land at one time belonged to Mr. Peleg Sweet, who was a man of large size and full features. And it's narrated that when one time he was digging, he came across a skull and a jaw, which to such size the skull would have been cover his head, and the jaw could be easily slipped over his face. And he thought it was the head of a giant, were enveloping his. And it's right here. This right here is called the Mother Stone of Balak. There's these giant stones that have been found. There's actually a camel to show you the size difference. This right here is an axe head they found that was 39 pounds. And this is the purpose of this is unknown. It's too heavy for a man to handle efficiently when you actually attach it to a wooden handle, and it remains non-functioning. It's just way too heavy for them to use. This right here is a 27-pound axe head found. Here's the side of it. Here's a picture of a guy next to it. And it actually says that this stone was actually supposed to be held between the thumb and forefingers. So you're actually supposed to be a hand axe. You're supposed to hold it between your thumb, your forefinger, and your middle finger. And you can find more of these interesting things at Far Out Adventures. It's a really interesting magazine. This right here is a skull found in the cave. And there's a ruler next to it. The skull measures almost 12 inches. And it says it's got an 8 3/4 inch mandible. Here's a skeleton hand they found. And this little joint right here in the fingers is the same joint next to a normal sized man's finger. It actually measures about 3.5 inches. That's huge compared to a man's. Man's are usually about 1 inch. This right here shows you a person holding their thumb right next to it, and you can see how big those bones would be. See, the average man's cubit goes from your finger to your elbow, and they measured that around 18 to 21 inches. So you can imagine how big Noah's Ark could have been if his sons were giants. This is a thigh bone replica from a giant skeleton found in Turkey. And this is a replica of what it would look like if it was actually on a man, and there's a person standing next to it. You know, Goliath in the Bible was 9 feet tall, and his king Og was 12 to 18 feet tall. This is a little boy standing next to that little thigh bone. And this is actually how big the man would be as an artist's rendition with a thigh bone that size. This right here shows you some petrified human jaw bones, which would go about 6.5 inches wide. There's some bracelets next to it just to show you the size comparison. This is a book right here talking about that there was a race of giants that lived here. This is near the outlet of this lake in Wisconsin. Mounds were found containing hundreds of skeletons. One skull was about 3 times the size of an ordinary human skull, and the other bones were correspondingly big. Genesis 6:4 says there were giants in those days. Genesis 1:26 and 27 says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." So the question is this Grandpa? What about cavemen? Is it possible for a man to go from an ape to a human-like, from a ape-like ancestor to a human? The question is it possible? I mean, Bill Clinton kind of does look a little bit like that. Now, not only were the people getting bigger and living longer, but the insects, the reptiles, the animals, and fish, they were also getting bigger. And we're going to cover that in the next episode. Can you imagine a millipede this size? What about a roach this size? Guess you need a lot of raid to kill those. And the question is, how will your child view the world after 12 to 16 years of evolution in your school system? You think he's going to think the world was created or evolved? You know, 75% of all children raised in public school in Christian schools who attend public schools will reject their Christian faith by their first year of college. So let's summarize. God has made the world. That means he owns it. And since God owns the world, he can make the rules. For instance, the 10 Commandments. And we are guilty of breaking all of his rules. You know, the 10 Commandments have a couple rules in there. Thou shalt not bear false witness. That means you shouldn't lie. Thou shalt not steal. And God judges the righteousness, and God's angry with the wicked every day. And God said that evil should not be in heaven. So again, let's summarize. God made the world. He owns it. He makes the rules, and we are guilty of breaking his rules. We're going to be punished, or we must find a substitute to take our place. And Jesus is willing and able to take our place. The question is, if you died today, where would you go? Smoking or non-smoking? You know, you're going to be dead for a long time. And all you have is that little dash between when you were born and when you die. And you should really use that dash for God. So if you want to write to me to schedule a meeting to speak at your church or ask me any questions, you can email me at godsohman@gmail.com. That's the end of this creation seminar. I'm going to have part 2 be out very soon. Again, make sure you subscribe to my page, click the notification bell, like the video, and also make a comment. And I appreciate you guys. Have a great day.